Good morning, everyone. My name is Zainab Salbi, and I have the great pleasure of moderating today's panel on Turkey. Turkey is known historically for secularism, for democracy, for a new way of Islam in the region, for women's rights. But recently, Turkey has been taking a new headlines for its role in the refugee crisis, for the wars against ISIS and the Kurds, for violence inside of Turkey, bombings and all of that, for freedom of press and for women's rights issues, with some of them very concerning, I would say. And I have the pleasure here to discuss with a great panelist with me. We'll start with the journalist Amberin Zaman, who is a columnist at The Monitor. We also have Selin Sayek Böke, who is one of the 96 women serving in Turkey's 550 seats parliament. We have also with us Ipek Bozkurt, who is working to address female homicide in Turkey. And lastly, and a great pleasure to have with us Melanne Verveer, who was the very first US ambassador for global women's issues. Welcome, everyone. I want to start with you, Amberin, because last week you were attacked in front of the Brookings Institute in Washington, D.C., physically by one of the security guards of President Erdogan. Can you tell us what happened and why were you attacked?
Well, I wasn't physically attacked. I was verbally assaulted. And what happened was that President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was going to be speaking at Brookings. And I wanted, as a journalist, to go there and cover the event. So I went there in an hour in advance of his arrival. And there was a gaggle of Kurdish demonstrators there, and they were peacefully demonstrating on the opposite side of the road. And all of a sudden, we saw a group of men come towards them, sort of hurling insults at them in Turkish. And it very quickly became obvious that these were the security detail of the Turkish president, and the DC cops intervened and stopped them. But then soon after, I saw a kind of commotion in the driveway of Brookings, and so I crossed the street, I went there, and it was total pandemonium. I saw one of my colleagues, a Turkish journalist, being sort of carted out by force from the building, even though he was accredited by Brookings to be there to cover the event. At the same time, I saw a woman sort of fall to the ground. She was shouting, she was being shoved around again by the security detail, all sorts of things happening. Then I saw a gentleman sort of being, the security detail sort of trying to kick him. So I went up to him and said, "Who are you? What's going on?" And he said he worked for NPR. And I was sort of looking around in disbelief. And one of the security guys came up to me and said, "What are you doing? What are you looking at us for? Get lost." And I told him, "I'm sorry, but I'm not going anywhere. And it's none of your business. And this is the United States. It's not Turkey." And so he called me a PKK whore. The PKK being a rebel group, a Kurdish rebel group that's been fighting for self-rule inside Turkey. So yes, I got called a whore by him. And he obviously knew who I was because I'm a well-known journalist in my country.
How often, Selin, I want to take that to you. From outside, I have heard personally a lot of derogatory remarks made about women by some government officials. And calling a journalist what she was called, calling women and describing women in a very derogatory way just for political opposition or expressing different views. How concerned are you as a parliamentarian and as actually a major leader in an opposition party, in a major opposition party? Are you facing that on a daily basis?
I think you wouldn't find a single woman in Turkey who doesn't feel this threat. So it's not who you are. It's actually your female identity that creates this threat itself. So yes, I am concerned. Hence my role in politics, because as you said, this actually starts with the language of politics. and then falls into the society and becomes a phenomenon that affects pretty much everybody in the society. So it's not a political issue alone, it really becomes a political issue that becomes a societal concern at the end of the day. So I've been in politics for around 1.5 years now. And I'm probably one of the lucky women in Turkey who doesn't have any physical violence in her life, who can say I actually am able to survive comfortably in Turkey. But I also was actually exposed to this language myself, because I was defined as the politician who wears skirts. I don't think any male in politics is defined by what they wear. Whereas if you're a female politician, by definition, you would not be talked about with your ideas, with your progressive politics, with what you dream for your country, but you're defined by what you wear or the color of your hair. So this definition of a female, of a woman, starts in the language of politics and then trickles down to the very details of our lives and ends up with the results that you've seen in that clip.
How recent is this language? Is this always been like this for women facing in Turkey, the sexist language? I don't know if you can repeat some of these derogatory remarks.
I wouldn't want
Or
to.
is that something new? Is that a new trend?
So one has to identify that the political language actually is a reflection of the political ideology itself. And this political ideology that defines today's very derogative anti-female language is the Islamist radical views that this government holds. So really, if you had another, as I define as the progressive politics, which I stand for, the language in politics would change, and hence, the reflection of that in the society would change. So the short answer is, one should not just define this in a very conformist manner and say, well, you know, it's the culture in the area, hence this is only natural. No, it's not natural. This has been elevated in the past couple of years, and it has been elevated because the political dominant figure right now, starting from the president himself and then enlarging through his governing party, is actually fighting against the women's rights that you and I would define here, which is very basic human rights.
I mean, one of my observations is that a lot of the language used for women is sexualized, is a whore or other language,
well,
sexualized.
The president attacked me personally using that kind of language.
Well, we'll come to that in a second. Ipek, I want to ask you, where do women's rights stand in Turkey? Because on the one hand, Turkish women are proud for accomplishing a lot. I mean, historically, we know Turkey is the first country, one of the first countries to give women right to vote. But beside that, that's, you know, there's a lot of accomplishments legally. Where do women's rights stand now?
Well, on paper, everything seems fine. In the Constitution, it's written that men and women are equal. In the criminal law as well. In the civil law, on paper, it's fine. But I think we all know that the important thing is how things written on paper, in laws, in regulations, translate into practice. So we have a great difference and deep problem in that respect. The difference is so much. Last year, more than 300 women were killed in my country. In the last 90 days, 94 women were killed. We are talking about underage children marriage, that we saw the pictures yesterday, and we saw discussion about that as well. We have been, for the last few weeks, we have been facing an immense political campaign about underage children's sexual assault in Turkey. So things are not going well. And women's rights issues, I think, they make part of a greater problem, a systematic problem about discrimination against women and gender-based violence and gender-based discrimination as well. So things are not working well. But there are so many women's organizations, NGOs, the one like I'm working for, We Will Stop the Homicides, Women's Homicide Platform. We fight for it. I mean, we fight for women's rights on the street. We have slogans, we chant, we say to women that you're not going to walk alone. And also we lead all this judicial battle in the courtrooms. So yes, we acknowledge that things are fine on paper, but we also do have a president who say that men and women are not equal in their nature. and we have ministers who utter in public that it's immoral for a woman to laugh in the street. So when you have these examples, when that is the language of the government, when it's the language of the bureaucrats, technocrats, it translates into how things work on the street, how men are motivated, how men feed off such discussions, how men feed off such language. So they say, well, I'm going to hurt my wife, I could stab my girlfriend, or I could kill my wife who wants to get a divorce, because I know that I could get away with it, because I've been told that men and women are not equal. So it's the language, it's like, it has a domino impact, you know? You say it at the top, and it finds a reflection at the bottom. Things are not well, but I think the reason why we are all here is that we're working to make things better.
Oh, thank you. Melanne, how concerned are you with the state of affairs on women's issues generally as the former global ambassador?
Well, I think it's very concerning, obviously. What you just heard is a snapshot of what's been going on, and I think what we all know is that the condition of women is very dispositive about the kinds of transformations that are occurring in a society. So if you look at the condition of women, you begin to get a picture of overall how that's going, how it's trending, and what potentially worse will happen. You have the specter of President Erdogan talking about the need to have a Turkish style of presidency, and increasingly that appears to be authoritarian. You have him talking about a Turkish style of a constitution, and that appears to be without checks and balances. And he's been talking about this Turkish style of women's rights, and very specifically says those are not Western rights, as though we weren't all bound by universal human rights, and has gone out of his way to say that the role of women is preordained, that it is set by religion, that women, in fact, have their roles and really shouldn't be in those places, like our parliamentarian, I would imagine, where the decisions get made mostly by men who belong in those places. He has talked about the need to have children, for women to have at least 3 children, not even depending on their circumstances, but 5 would be more optimal. So you've got this steady drumbeat every time he seems to speak to this topic that then cavalcades and moves into the kinds of things that our colleagues have been describing. The whole issue of violence against women, as you just heard from the lawyer, is one that is becoming a scourge, and the sense of impunity, the fact that I won't be prosecuted. So, you know, one of the highest femicide rates in the world, you can't imagine, it's Turkey. You know, it's not usually a country that is put in this category. Women's employment is the lowest in the OECD countries, women's economic participation. It is staggering in terms, even for educated women, the opportunities aren't what they should be. So you have also very low rates in terms of contracting that gap between men and women in society. So instead of Turkey moving up that ladder, Turkey is 130th out of 145 on that human development, economic development scale. So these trends are extremely concerning, and there's no better understanding of what's happening than what we've just heard from our colleagues on the panel who are going through it. But I do want to add to what our lawyer said, which is that the strength of civil society, I've been to Turkey many times, and the strength of the women in civil society, even as that society becomes more polarized, is very striking. And I think perhaps one of the reasons for the pushback is because women are on the front lines.
the society, though, is polarized at the moment, in my experience of Turkey. And it is, I have to say, unfortunate that we do not have a member with us from the AKP party, the leading party, because we would need to have a full discussion to be incorporated. So I want to go back into what's leading the society to be fragmented right now, because it's sort of two sides of Turkey right now, and it's very tense, the relationship. I want to go back to you, Amberin, for the attack that you again had, or recently had, because you questioned the president about, and I want to paraphrase it in here. You asked whether Muslims have the right to question their authorities, and he attacked you harshly. My question for you is, why is it a question of Islam as opposed to a question of democracy? Why did you make it a question of whether Muslims have the right to question?
No, I never said that. I never said Muslims don't have the right to question anything. I don't know how you came to think that, but I was actually on a TV program, well, that's a misquote, with the main opposition leader, Selin's party leader, and we were talking about the lack of critical thinking in Turkey, and I said it was a function of, A, the education system, but also the fact that Islamist tarikats, brotherhoods, had held so much sway, and that, you know, the idea of individualism is discouraged by these tarikats, that it's always about consensus.
But you were talking about the state system, which is democracy, which is a secular system.
No, I was just talking about responding to his, critique about the lack of critical thinking. I was just commenting that the education system was, was very unhelpful in that respect, and the fact that, these tarikats also had so much influence, and that they too discouraged critical thinking, that it's more about consensus, and so that was distorted as if to, by the pro-government press, and obviously by the president, to say that I had insulted Islam, which of course I had not. I'm a Muslim, and I'm proud of being a Muslim, and so this was just manipulated to discredit me, because I'm a journalist who actually supported this government for a very long time, because in fact this government did very many good things, and I see a revisionism that's happening now, as it casting the past as much better, when in fact it was not. The generals, the army in Turkey used to govern the country. So one form of authoritarianism has been supplanted by another, and it's a very great pity to see this government take this path, having encouraged so much hope among us. Or why would the European Union have opened full membership negotiations with Turkey had this government not been doing the right things initially? But over time, it lost its way. I think incumbency is a huge problem. The lack of a credible opposition is a huge problem in Turkey, and the character of Erdogan. But putting all of this in a broader context, the lack of the sort of culture of impunity goes back to 1915, when most of Turkey's non-Muslim population was destroyed, and Turkey has never really been held accountable or held itself accountable for that.
That's true. That's true. Selin, so you, again, come from the major opposition party that was part of making illegal for women to wear headscarf for the longest time. How do you think this contributed to the tension that we have right now? Because the other side AKP argues that we gave women the rights now, the freedom to enter a parliament or university while wearing headscarf, and that is correct. That's part of a woman's freedom to choose whether to wear a skirt or a headscarf, But how do you think that past of particularly your party has contributed to that, and what the party and you particularly are doing to sort of reconcile and dialogue and connections perhaps in a new way?
May I start by saying this polarization that you defined is pretty much reflective in the question that you're asking, in that currently Turkey is polarized based on political views. Now, this is to suggest the problem is actually has to be solved within politics itself. Hence, there is a huge duty on our shoulders as politicians, and especially as female politicians who actually will be the main losers when this all crumbles down. Hence the strength of the women in fighting for their rights, because it's our rights that are going to go first, and once our rights are gone, it's the society that's going to dissolve. Hence you see more women in the forefront, and women are stronger everywhere throughout the world. This is quite evident in the room here. It was evident yesterday night. It's going to be evident throughout the day, I'm sure. Now, if we go back and do a historical perspective, CHP, the party I'm a part of, is actually the longest-standing party in Turkey. We're as old as the Republic. We were the founding party, indeed. So, you know, any mistakes of Turkey would definitely have a part of us in the politics of it. But having said this, this polarization we view is extremely, extremely critical and very dangerous. Hence, we have played a critical role in giving that freedom to women of wearing headscarves if they wish to. So while AKP was the governing party, we as the main opposition party actually supported that change in the law, which didn't make any sense anyway, right? And as you say, women have the freedom to wear what they want to wear. Women have the freedom to believe in what they want to believe in. Women have the freedom of deciding on whether or not they're going to have kids. Women have the rights to decide on whether or not they're going to work or not. That is our ideology. That's the progressive politics that we are pushing for. The reason I said the solution lies in politics is because there was a recent survey which showed that 80% of the public in Turkey don't want their kids to play with kids from families who voted for other political parties. Think of this. You decide on who your kid is going to have a play date with based on who their parent voted for. This is to say, it's not the society, it's politics that's breaking up the society. Hence, the solution has to come through politics. And here, my duty as a female politician, and we're only 81 or 82 in the parliament right now, out of 550. So we're not many in number, but we're very strong. We're very strong because, again, we realize we're going to be the ones who lose. And the progressive politics has to be one that says we live together, shoulder to shoulder, heart to heart, eye to eye. And this is going to start with a truce between those who are different. We might be different in our gender, we might be different in our ethnicity, we might be different in our beliefs, but at the end of the day, we're humans, and that's what we have to fight for.
So my question is, it's a very disturbing video, and domestic violence is one of the main issues women face worldwide. To what extent this is a particularly Turkish issue? And what are of the challenges women are facing, whether it's homicide, child marriage, domestic violence, all of that? To what extent it is a particularly issue of Turkey? To what extent it's a larger discussion of what women face worldwide?
I mean, having seen and watched all these women of yesterday sharing their stories, I come to the understanding that it's a very global thing. Our experiences are same. Our legal battles are more or less similar. So this shows that violence against women, gender-based violence, are political, are very systematic. Depending on a regime in a country, it comes in different ways. It has different pictures, but the end result is same. So domestic violence in Turkey is not a Turkish thing. It's a systematic thing. Yes, of course, because of the fact that it's a very conservative party that's been ruling the company for the government for the last 14 years. The fact that it's a majority of the population is Muslim, and men and women relations are deepened under the root, are problematic. Yes, those are the things that add up and contribute to the current problems, the violence, that escalating number of violence against women. But it's also the current politicians. It's the system, the impunity in the legal system that adds up. So it's part of a very global problem. And this is my client Kübra, whose case is pending. So I would not prefer to speak a lot about him. But men like his husband, and a lot of men in Turkey will hurt and exert violence against their wives, girlfriends, ex-fiancés, knowing that the legal system would protect them. It's the shield of this impunity. It's the legal system that gives them a way, a hole to get away. So we see it during the preliminary investigation phases, and we see it during the trial cases. So it's not only one thing, it's the total. And before we started our discussion, you were asking whether it's correct that whether the numbers increase or whether there was much more visibility at it. The government currently says in my country that, oh, the violence level was always same, it just got much more visible. I think that's very foxy. The violence escalated, and NGOs like mine, women platforms, women activists, we made it much more visible. So we made visible what was escalating. I think that's our aim, actually, and our raison d'être to live.
Melanne, there's a new terror law in Turkey passed investigating academics, journalists, anybody who has any opposition views. Only 1/3 of women in Turkey are in the workforce, which is quite low. And then we talked a lot about freedom of press, about political issues. Why is Turkey why is that important for the Western world? Why should Turkey be important for the Western world?
Before I go there, let me just follow up on this issue of violence against women, because I think you see things happening in Turkey that typically happen in other places. This is a global scourge. There is no doubt about that. It is not a private matter. It is not a cultural matter. It is criminal. It is criminal to violate women. And therefore, when the state begins to negate the use of the law to enforce actions that criminalize this, and impunity is not allowed to reign, where the mindset is not strengthened, that they won't come after me, nothing will happen, I can do this, that begins to erode any framework for protection, for prevention, and certainly for prosecution. So this is a really serious issue, and one, I think the fact that they're not collecting statistics, they're blaming the fact that, oh, these numbers just come out because there's more awareness today. No, it's because it is increasing and nothing is being done about it, or little is being done about it, and it's being strengthened. Why Turkey matters. It is one of the most strategic countries in the world. It is a member of NATO. Its neighbors today are Iran, Syria, and Iraq. Everybody knows what that represents. And what happens internally is critically important to the whole geopolitical consideration. One of the things we didn't talk about is the fact that within Turkey, there is a huge conflict going on against the Kurds today. In many cities, places I visited when I first went to Turkey as ambassador today look like Syria because of the conflict that's going on there and is raging. But going after the journalists, going after the academics, suppressing all kind of dissent, suppressing criticism, doing it in the name of fighting terrorism, this is very dangerous. And I think in many ways today, women like the ones on the stage and all the people of Turkey who share their views feel that the EU and the West have not really spoken out against what is happening. And the fact that human rights matter and these kinds of things shouldn't be happening. And it will matter for Turkey, the people of Turkey, but for our world as well.
For the region, absolutely. And on this note, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Really pleasure. Thank you.